Monday, so we're talking World War One here. This week it's gonna be kind of interesting. I guess Farty, go ahead and lead it off.
Okay, so today we're starting off on the 1st of August in 1915 with a bit of a tirade about submarines. And once again, we've got another first where this is pretty much the first major conflict where you started using ironclad submarines, like proper pressure vessels and stuff like that, designed to go an appreciable distance. These all still were very, very, very basic machines. There's no sonars, no radars. They didn't have bloody oxygen making equipment or air scrubbers and stuff like that. So still snorkel technology, and a lot of the tactics have yet to be finalised and figured out. These started off with the British submarines, the E1 through to, I believe, the E15.
Mm-hmm.
And they mainly started with trying to penetrate the Dardanelles through the Dardanelles Straits. And major reasons why you couldn't put straightforward battleships through there is because of shore batteries and minefields. And the Australians also had a couple of submarines in the area named the AE1 and the AE2. And the AE2 has a very, very interesting story to it. It tried to penetrate the Dardanelles. It did succeed in torpedoing a Turkish patrol boat, but on the way out, the stories that they was actually scraping the guy ropes for the torpedoes on the way in and on the way out. But something happened, and basically the AE2 hit a salinity level, which changed the buoyancy of the boat about midpoint and basically turned it into a bobbing top. Upon where the nose breached the surface, it launched up into the air a little bit and started bobbing up and down like that. And the Turkish promptly fired upon it, and some of the crew were captured out of it.
Now, at least some of the crew actually survived. At least they survived the initial part. I don't know how many survived capture, because that became an issue. And in fact, it's going to be an issue while we're talking about this whole thing. But what was really ballsy is you got to think what these guys were actually doing is that they're actually sneaking a sub all the way through all this, right? And a number of them didn't make it. Okay, when we talk about the British subs, we tend to focus on their successes. A number of these subs, in the attempt to actually breach this, didn't make it. They ran aground, and the crews were captured and so forth. But quite a few, I think they lost like 2 in this attempt to try and push these subs into here. But a number of the subs did make it, including the AE2 that he's talking about. And why was this important? Well, it was important because if you take a look at this big open area, it gave them a lot of freedom of movement, and it also helped them to prevent a lot of the Ottoman Turks from easy reinforcement. And the reason for it is twofold. Okay, in order to try and reinforce this, the Turks had to sit up there and get troops on here. They had to get troops onto this peninsula. Well, how do they do that? Well, you can try and run across here, all right, but basically you're just going to be doing rowboating across here, which is a long ways, and basically you're getting attacked by these subs, all right, into this area, or you try and walk along here, in which case, once you get into this narrow point, the British Navy comes into effect because they can range shells all along here, and you can see the main supply route here goes right along the coast.
Plus, also there was the logistics of the terrain as well.
All right. So, and of course, you're marching through heat, you're marching through sun, you're marching through this. So this became an issue. Okay. The Turks were suffering too. You got to understand that this was a brutal battle, hand to hand in some cases. And these guys are at their wits' end when they're fighting this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, and you say there will be a problem with POWs and their treatment. Well, I mean, the Turks are nice. I mean, they treated Armenians perfectly reasonably, didn't they?
Well, funnily enough, they did treat the Commonwealth troops a hell of a lot better. As I mentioned last week, there's been a long-lasting sort of respect and camaraderie between both Turkey and Australia because of the tenacity of both sides at the time. We respected them because they didn't run away, and they respected us because we fought hard.
That's true to a point. Okay, for the Anzacs and so forth, yes. For the Commonwealth troops, though, from the Indian troops and stuff that were led at Kut, and we'll be talking about it. The officers were treated fine, right? But the enlisted guys, they were treated like shit. They were absolutely treated like hell. All right, and they lost. They died in the thousands.
Well, no, and while we were off air, prepping for the show and bullshitting, we were talking about the submarines running through there. And I had brought up, well, why didn't they attach something there to cut the mines? Explain to everybody, why they didn't do that. Because you would think you could attach something and cut whatever is tethering the mines there, right?
Well, you can. Go ahead.
They're literally beyond blind. Like I said, they don't have radar, they don't have sonar. They literally are like, this would probably be one of the most terrifying aspects of fucking warfare you could probably get into. Lock yourself in a pressurized steel cylinder, go underwater, and hope you don't run aground or hit a rocky outcrop or fucking do something to get you sunk. And of course, no one's going to find you back in those days. Like, that'd be fucking terrifying. So yeah, like they literally wouldn't be able to see the mines before they'd effectively hit them. Like I mentioned, the AE2 was scraping the guy ropes. And partially the reason for the guy ropes is that if something does come underneath the mines, that the guy ropes would attach themselves to it and then pull the mine down on top of it. So, yeah, they just simply didn't have the capabilities at the time to even determine where these mines were.
And then, okay, so you're cutting on the mine. What happens if the mine has a vibration sensor on it? Now, you remember, you're out there, right? You're going to jump off the boat, right? You're going to jump off the submarine, climb on up and go on out. And then you're going to be sitting there with a hacksaw, hacking away at a mine. Does this sound like a good plan to you?
Well, even if you had fixed wire cutters, and that's not a dumb idea.
That's not. But what kind of wire cutters you're talking about? These are not just. These cables aren't just 12 gauge wire, 10 gauge wire.
Yeah, no, and that's where I was going with that. Yeah, any form of passive wire cutting equipment would be more conducive to grab the wire and pull the mine down on top of you.
And then what happens when you do cut the mine? What does the mine do?
Just sits and floats and just bobs around for a while and
floats down the stream, right?
Yeah, hopefully someone might see it before you run into it. But yeah, like this was actually a problem that they had even up in World War II, where mines had freed from their moorings and floated up on the shore, and it's been a problem even since World War II, and World War I mines floating to the surface and shit like that, affecting sea traffic and whatnot. Mines are a pain in the ass. Like, doesn't matter whether they're on land or in water; they're just a fucking kind of an idea.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, though, if you can cut the mine and get it free and let it go down, then you could bring the fleet in as the mines are drifting down away from you.
Well, but then you don't have any control over them. You have no control where the mines are floating. You could have floated it right into your way.
Yeah, if you could, it'd be a bloody brilliant idea. The unfortunate part about it is, at this point in time, there wasn't really any way that you could do it effectively.
It's not like you could steer the mine.
You could try and use currents and natural weather and all this kind of stuff, but yeah, when is that ever fucking predictable?
I mean, you have a general idea where the mine's going to go, but you don't know exactly. And you could float the damn thing right into yourself. And they're going to be
Fair enough.
the enemy is going to replace it very easily. The other thing about it is you got to remember, the enemy can replace this fairly easily just from the coastlines, and they can just go back out there and put the mines back in. Okay, you cut the mines. Can you get there before the mines get replaced? Is the next question.
Well, even that too, like the whole process of laying a minefield at that point in time had become so efficient. It was literally kick them off the back of a boat as it's driving along.
Right.
So,
as long as you don't get shelled, you're fine. But by getting the submarines in here, one of the things that they were able to do, in fact, one of the British subs, I think it's the 11, actually sank a Turkish transport with 4,000 troops on it.
That's good because not that they sank the transport. Well, maybe that was good actually from our perspective, but still, no. I was about to ask, what did the British accomplish by getting the subs within that area? Because that was a risk. What came of it?
Well, ultimately, not very much.
Well, correct. In the end, nothing. Because in the end, they have to pull. They end up pulling back from Gallipoli. But in the short term, because those subs are there, helping to delay and make logistics difficult and resupply difficult for the Turks, they're looking at it as, okay, well, the Turks can only have so many men, and if you can't resupply the men, if you can't reinforce the men, then guess what? You can win. Now, is it successful to do that? No, because as you can tell, this the whole thing is controlled by the Turks. The Turks just have to rechange and configure in their own minds how to actually fight this battle, which, quite frankly, over time, they do. And they basically bring in Mustafa Ataturk, who eventually then takes control of the entire Gallipoli campaign for the Turks.
So you also got to remember back in those days, like submarines were pretty much a harassing weapon. Even in World War II, even with the wolf packs and all this kind of stuff, they were never going to win wars. They're not a war-winning weapon. But you take out some supplies here, they've got to replace them. You take out 4,000 troops there. Well, shit, that's a big lot of troops. Well, you got to replace them too. It doesn't do anything to actually stop the war, but it does a lot to harass and hinder the enemy's movements and actions and whatnot.
It can prevent resupply, and they can prevent. They're not going to win a battle of the ocean, on the ocean itself necessarily.
Yeah, and not
at that time
that quickly from the sea battle, but looking at the 3rd of August, the Russians start to evacuate part of Armenia. It looks like. Am I reading that right?
No. The Russians are losing in the north. The Russians, if you take a look at Russia, all right, where they're beginning to lose through here.
It was really small on my screen, so it's the Russians evacuating. They're not evacuating the Armenians.
No.
Okay.
We're over here. I'm sorry. They're under pressure now to take this. You got to remember, the Austro-Hungarians are pressing them in this area. This area here is from the standpoint of the Russians is an absolute disaster, and they're being forced back further and further and further. And the Germans are basically pushing the German, Austrian, Hungarians, right, are pushing Bulgaria. Okay, they are trying to get Bulgaria to join the war on the side of the Turks and the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans. And that's what you see with this when they float this loan. They floated a freaking huge ass $400 million franc loan to the Bulgarians to get them to join the battle on their side.
What was the franc worth at the time?
It was pretty strong.
I don't know the difference between what that was worth, but it does work. It does bring them in the war on the side of the Turks.
Yeah, it was pretty strong because, France was part of the powers at the time. So it would have been a currency that you'd be able to fucking convert into greenback or pound or other Reich marks or marks. Sorry, stuff like that.
So on the 6th, what you have is the operational landing of the Anzac landing here. Is this the map you wanted?
Go to that first one you had, because that's what we ended up taking. The first one you had shows where the landings were in our initial.
Oh, this one here?
That's the fella.
Okay.
So that shows basically the red part down at the end of the peninsula there. That's the original landings, the original April 25th landings. And there's the point directly south of that. It's got the little black dot there. That was actually taken by the French. It was fucking bloody Kumkali or Kumkali.
Down here?
So the French had got that point there, and so what we wanted to do was obviously go north of that point there. So the second the Suva Bay campaign was an attempt to try and cut more forces off from Ataturk's northern relief force.
Their big idea was to where they're having the major problem of trying to force the Dardanelles, right, was right here, because this is the narrow point. Okay, so if they could have gotten the British warships into this area, the British would have been able to then move further. Let's pull this up and zero in. Basically, what they're trying to do, all right, is take this area here, at which point now they can bring in the warships. And once the warships get into this area, they have a bit more room to maneuver, right? You got a few miles between here, right? Mm-hmm. And once they get into here now, if you can get the British warships into here, Istanbul is now a target.
Also, too, you got to remember there's the Black Fleet that's up there as well. The Russians have got.
I'm sorry.
The Russians have got ships in that large estuary up the north,
right?
And it was always trying to be a thing of getting the Russians to link up with the Poms, but they already had their problems elsewhere and just couldn't get their shit together in time.
If the British can be attacking from this end while the Russians are attacking from this end, they could basically split the Turkish Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they could take Constantinople.
Right.
Yep. And that was the ultimate goal, but it didn't work.
And if they could have taken Constantinople
to be in the West's hands again, they would have never given it up. There's no way.
No, they would not have. And it would have become another point of hatred for everyone.
If anything, I'd actually suggest that if we had taken Constantinople and possibly large portions of the former Persian Empire and all this kind of stuff, that would have more likely been the point of contention that would have started the war on terror today, and it would have probably happened a good 20 years previous.
Well, and you can tell by the fact that all of us, even though two of us are American and one's an Aussie, we're all calling it Constantinople.
Well, at the time it was. It doesn't get turned over. It doesn't get referred to as Istanbul until after Mustafa Ataturk takes over Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in this map you can see. Hang on. Let's see if you got the same map up. All right. Yep. Oh, this one here. Yep, that'll do. Let me just bring that one up so I can see a bit better. Okay, so there you can see the amount of forces that we've had in here. Full battalions, basically trying to get a foothold there and do what we did the last time and try and get up the hills. We actually know this little conflict not as the Suva Bay campaign, but the Battle for Lone Pine. And little interesting story there is that we'd shelled the fucking bejesus out of this sort of rocky outcrop that we've gone into, to the point where there was only just this one pine tree left at the top of a hill, and it was not even really a pine tree. It was mainly the stump of a pine tree, and that's how it got its name. We just called it Lone Pine.
Is that around Hill? Is that around Hill 60?
It's below. It's south of Hill 60.
Right here. I see.
It's
right
marked
here
on that map. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is before the Sari Bar offensive, where the British will start to push a bit further north to Sari Bar. And pretty much we'll get to, I think it's, well, you see where the Turks are at this point in time on that map. That's pretty much where we'll advance to, and we'll push them back to where their reinforcements are. I'm pretty sure we didn't get Maltepe.
No.
I'm pretty sure of that.
No, I don't think you did. I think it basically stabilizes right along this edge here, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, but if you go back to that other map the black and white map, by December, that's as far as we'll advance.
And you can see look at what the trench lines look like. Look at how much the trench lines, if you take a look at this, one of the things that you start to see at this point in the war, right, is look at the trench lines and see how they reinforce one another, where, okay, you take the first line of trenches and what they do is then they just retreat back to this other one, and they've created it so that they can make movement back along through these trenches to reinforce other trench lines. And of course, that's exactly what the Turks are doing as well. This is becoming what trench warfare is all about.
How many miles do the Anzacs actually take here? It doesn't look like much.
Well, we took maybe about 10 miles of trench line itself. I can't tell you what the squareage is, but the whole campaign conflict area itself is about 20 miles from north to south.
Well, if you take a look at it, what you're talking about is right here. They went in and basically carved a little bubble out, like right here.
Pretty much.
With a little bit of bush here. And the idea was if they could have cut this off here, the British forces could have advanced from the south. All right, they could have at least, they then would have had the narrows. They could have taken the narrows then, and then with the narrows in their hands, they could then start to continue the campaign right along this, but with support from the fleet now, because there was nothing the Turks could do. If they could have had the support of the fleet, then at this point, all the way up, one thing at a time, all the way through, that they would have then been able to just taken, rolled up along this edge and then get in any kind of amphibious landing that they wanted. Now, this goes back to, if you remember this island, Leptos, right here. What's happening is this is where the British subs and so forth and all the ships, the British ships, the reason they took this is the British ships are coming here for resupply and repair and going back out again. That's why they did it. You got to remember, this irritated the Greeks and delayed the Greeks' entry into the war. The Greeks get involved in the war because of the Bulgarians.
And that'll happen in about a month or so.
Yes.
So the ultimate goal with this Suva Bay campaign was a carry on from the initial landings, that was pretty much where they were supposed to go in the first place. But it's a little bit north. The whole ultimate point was to cut off that peninsula, cut off the troops that were there and basically besiege them, starve them out, and then fight off any reinforcements that were coming from the north. And the Suva Bay campaign was basically just part two of that. Right, we didn't do it down south. Let's go a little bit north and see if we can do that before more reinforcements and supplies and shit come filtering through. And again, we just simply couldn't do it.
Yeah. There was just no way to do it, is what it comes down to. So you end up with the Sari Bar campaign, which we talked about. All right, there's some the Viscount Kato, the Japanese Minister for Foreign Affairs, resigns. This doesn't mean anything to us and doesn't really have much of an effect on the war itself. Okay, Germany begins a naval battle in the Riga. Okay, now why is this important? Riga is up here. This is the Riga area. And you can see now in Lithuania, all right, right here, all right, the Germans are pushing this far up. Okay, this is all being part of the movement against the Russians. The Russians are being defeated. They're losing battle after battle. They restabilize the line slowly, and then, of course, they're ending up pulling back. And the Germans are basically having a field day. Now, the British are trying to supply them, all right, across here, but because of the German forces, they're not able to successfully supply or resupply the Russians.
Well, MC, you mean that the Tsar can't lead his military forces in a modern war with, I don't know,
No, they can't.
unsupplied troops?
They are
and
not.
organic food?
The Russians are not, as much as everybody wants to believe them to be, the Russians are not a modern state. The Russians are still a backwards ass nation. They do not have the industrial capability of fighting a modern war against a modern military machine, especially against the German forces. All right. And then with German forces to stiffen them up, the German forces and the Austro-Hungarian forces, they're just losing battle after battle.
Yep, and also you got to remember there's a lot of internal conflict going on about this point in time with the communists and the Bolsheviks and all this, and everybody wants to get the Cossacks on their side, but yeah.
There is a lot of political maneuvering that is happening. This goes. We haven't talked about it, and we probably should do a talk about the Russian and especially about the Mad Monk Rasmussen and political court and so forth.
Well, no, and Embassy, I've been alluding to that. I think at the end of every one of our World War I talks, I asked two questions. What's going on in Russia right about now? And what's going on within the United States? Because Russia is going to collapse.
We're going to talk about something that happens in the United States with what's going on within the United States in a little bit here, because there's something that does happen that has an effect. Okay. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I found quite notable here is this, which is the first ship sunk by torpedo from a British seaplane. They're actually using seaplanes, all right, in this attack here, and they'll put a torpedo on one, and they're sinking some boats here in the Dardanelles. It's not it. Instead of doing what they needed to do with the seaplanes, okay, which is, since you've got the seaplanes in this area, start to use them in a coordinated, operational attack on this area here to help the forces so that they know where to shell, where the machine guns are at. They're using them as, okay, we can sink some ships with them. That's great, but you needed to support the land element. They needed to do coordination with the land element so that they could allow them to go forward.
Well, no, and I see Falcon in the chat. Falcon, at this point in time in aviation, it was mainly for reconnaissance. So, I'm guessing you would agree with me when I asked this question. Why the fuck did they suddenly decide, let's use them to attack people and not do what we've been doing on the Western Front the whole goddamn war?
The best explanation I've ever seen is a Disney cartoon, and it literally is, well, the first use of aircraft in warfare were just used to observe the enemy, and both sides were using it, and at first they were all, cheery and cheerful, and, you saw the German fly past the POM, and he gives the POM a wave, and the POM gives him a wave, and then this continues on for a little while, and then one guy decides, well, hang on, if the other guy can see my troops, well, then he's getting intelligence, so I should stop him. And then you see the two planes fly past each other, and the German waves, and the POM throws a brick at him. And then this escalates to the next time the German comes past with a pistol, and then the next time the POM comes past with a rifle, and then the next thing you know, the German's coming past with a machine gun, and now they're fucking bombing people and all this kind of stuff. It was mainly sort of the initial aircraft that they were using at the beginning of the war could only really be flown at first light or at dusk when there was very, very little wind, because effectively they were literally box kites with an engine on it.
That's true.
They had very little power, very little speed, and
but one of the things they weren't putting on these planes
was guns.
No, what they were not putting on the planes was radios.
Oh, that's another thing there too. Well, yeah, that was another thing. So, like, if you shot down the reconnaissance aircraft, there went his information. He could see you, but he still had to go home to tell everybody about it.
They were more interested in putting cameras on these things than radios. All right, and this could have changed the entire dynamic, all right, of observation, because they could have used these as radio observation platforms if they had thought about it. They didn't, though. They were more interested. And the other thing was, of course, and this is very true. This is very, very true. And it's even true to this day. What they want to do is, what commanders want to see is, they want to see confirmation. They don't want to hear about it on a radio. Okay, they don't want somebody saying, the guy's radio in the map, here's where he's saying they're stuck, do something. They're going to be, well, show me. They will not give operational control over to radios in that regard.
They did have aerial communications in some respect at this point in time, because there was the use of observation balloons, and this is exactly what it sounds like. You stick a guy underneath a balloon in a gondola, and you just basically raise him up on a tether, and he looks through a pair of binoculars and Morse codes through a landline back down to the ground, what he can see. That was more the first use of like real-time battlefield reporting and stuff like that. But even still, like your airplanes back in those days, like right at the beginning, they effectively couldn't really carry photographic equipment like to any appreciable extent, because whilst you're flying high, you take a photo with, say, your brownie box camera, well, it's going to look exactly what it looks like to the person flying the plane, a series of ants crawling across the ground. Like, you know, your artillery pieces would be so small, they'd be not very, you wouldn't be able to see them very well in a photo. So you did have to have bigger lenses and stuff like that. And in some cases, that did require a second person in the aeroplane. And now you're sort of getting a bit beyond the capabilities of the aircraft at that point in time.
Well, you're definitely pushing the capabilities of the aircraft at that time. And of course, you're also pushing the optics. I mean, there were the abilities in so forth, reconnaissance and so forth, expanded by leaps and bounds. Okay, during this time frame, but at the same time, if people would have been thinking about using a combined arms approach with the planes correctly, all right, they could have changed the dynamic on the ground by utilizing them to say, okay, here's where the point is. Now, on the battlefield in the West, all right, against the Allies, that was always going to be somewhat problematic, because once you started realizing that that's what they were doing, you were going to try and shoot them down, and you were going to make dedicated sweeps by your airframes to shoot them down. That's what both sides were doing. That's when you got into the fighter against fighters and everything else. Their main goal at that point wasn't. Everyone thinks about them, well, they're just doing these fighter sweeps. Well, what were those fighter sweeps really trying to do? They were trying to deny the enemy reconnaissance. That's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so but they never achieved the full integration that could have made these kind of combat operations effective.
Not until right at the end, when Monash got a free rein. This is the beauty of World War One. I mean, like anything to do with modern warfare, and you ask the question, well, how did they come up with that? Just go straight back to World War One, and you can see exactly in detail. Well, they started off with this, and then this happened, and then that incident happened, then they did this, and then that sprang from that, and this and that, and next thing you know, we've got combined air arms, air superiority, reconnaissance, fucking fighters, bombers.
Right, you're seeing the development as it takes place, but you're seeing all the different elements of technology start to come to the fore that it isn't there yet. All right, they're not utilizing it the way it can be utilized. I mean, even the communications of using wireless on the ground, they have the capability of doing some of this stuff if they would have made the concerted effort to go in that direction. It's just that all this technology is so new that nobody's realizing how it could be utilized in a larger thing until somebody gets the bright idea. Hey, let's try this here.
And there's also with that too, you've got the young people that are coming up going, well, we've got radios, we've got aircraft, now we're getting tanks and we can communicate with artillery and all this kind of stuff. Well, this is what I want to do. And then you'll have some fuckwit right up in the top command going, no, that won't work. Well, what I know works and we'll do what I know. So we'll just throw a whole battalion against this machine gun and see what sticks. Okay, thanks, fuckwit.
All right. So you have the Royal Edward sunk, all right, in the Aegean. Now this was important because this is a transport ship that's transporting, you know, Allied forces and troops, now sunk. Most of the people survive this, but when you sink a transport, you sink people with it that are intended to be to resupply and also to be able to send them with their weapons and their equipment. Well, yeah, even if you save the thousands of troops that are on the transport, you know what you don't get? All of their material. Because for some reason, swimming with a rifle becomes less of an option for you, all right, when you're sinking. You tend to let go of the rifle so you can at least tread water for a period of time.
Yep. And ammunition belts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that just goes to the bottom of the ocean. All right. So
yeah, that's going back to where I was saying with like the submarines as a hindering kind of thing. You sink a troop ship. Well, you might save half the blokes that were on the ship, but you've lost all of their rifles and all of their ammunition, and an unloaded weapon in warfare is a fucking useless implement.
All right. So as you go forward during this time frame, we've talked about the operation in Silva. All right. You see the governments now. They make a conditional offer of territorial acquisitions to Serbia. They're trying to knock Serbia out of the war. The Serbs are still fighting. Now you got to remember that in the 1914, everything basically begins because of the Serbs, and it's a year later, and the Serbia is still alive. The group that started the battle, they're still fighting against the Austro-Hungarians, and in one sense, it's tying down Austro-Hungarian forces, and it's given a stick to the eye, but it's also given a lot of propaganda value to everyone else. Now the Germans. What's interesting about this is the Germans have no intention of helping the Austro-Hungarians deal with the Serbians. They're like, you guys wanted to do this. Our war is Russia in France. Our war isn't Serbia. You're going to have to deal with the Serbians.
Well, yeah, but they helped them stem the bleeding.
They help them stem the bleeding in when it comes to the Russians getting involved and things like that, but they won't help them repress the Serbians, to take Serbia out of the war. They will not put forces to do that.
So this will be a massive point of contention with the with most involved too, because the Serbs basically just went into the hills and just entrenched themselves, and they couldn't be moved.
It's a partisan battle. It's guerrilla campaign. It's nasty, all right, and it's brutal.
Is it almost like the Indian Territory in the American Civil War?
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, it's brutal warfare, all right. And of course, it turns into partisan warfare where you got you're basically having to wipe out towns and shit.
So let me give you an idea about what the Serbs are like. You see, I got a mate who's a Serb, and I keep calling him my Serbian war criminal mate because, every time there's a fucking conflict over there, he's off. So he tells me jokes like this. This is a typical Serbian joke for you. There's the FBI, the South African police, and the Serbian police, and they're in Africa, and they had to go and find an elephant. Anyway, so the FBI goes off. Half an hour later, they come back with an elephant. 10 minutes later, who's the other cunts I said? Fucking, I've already fucked this joke up. Anyway,
That's all right.
Yeah, the South Africans, they come back a half hour later with an elephant. But 3 days later, the Serbians come back with this battered and bruised giraffe, and the fucking the adjudicator was trying to say to the Serbian fella, look, fucking, that's not an elephant, when the Serbian guy, tapping his nightstick on his hand, turns to the giraffe and says, tell them what you are. That's a typical Serbian joke for you. So that gives you the kind of mindset that those people have.
Yeah, the brutality is the idea of brutality from the Americans and so forth is completely different. All right. On the 19th of August, you have a German battle cruiser, the Moltke, was torpedoed by a British submarine. All right.
Mhm.
The British are their subs are ranging deep into these areas, although they're not. The idea of the British subs and what they were going to do, everyone is worried about the torpedoes, right? Then you have this: the SS Arabic is sunk by German submarine. Why is this important? This is important because just like the Lusitania, this was a passenger ship. It was sunk off the coast of, I believe, Ireland. Okay, this is being played up in the United States as the barbaric Huns of the Germans. It's another attempt to rally support where the Americans don't want to go to war, right? But this pushes more anti-German sentiment, all right, within the campaign. And Woodrow Wilson, once again, plays this up.
And of course, the Germans will strike back by saying, "Oh, but it was surreptitiously carrying war goods, so technically it was a war vessel, so technically we were allowed to sink it."
Well,
Just like the Lusitania.
You know what? Hey, do I have to be the asshole here? I'm going to be the asshole. Fuck it. Why the fuck is there a bunch of transport ships in the middle of wartime?
Doing transport duties.
Yeah.
Seriously.
How do you get troops and how do you get them supplied and how do you take off casualties and bring in reinforcements?
Then they're not transport ships, are they?
No,
well,
they're transport ships. Now, passenger ship, you could say. Now that the Arabic was a quote unquote passenger ship, but then again, America's not. They're neutral. America's neutral. Yeah. Got to remember.
Yep, and that was the argument with the Lusitania. The Germans claimed that it was carrying war goods. The Americans are saying, no, it was a passenger ship. It kind of turns out now that, yeah, there's explosives and stuff on the Lusitania still, but that's neither here nor there. By rights, it was an American-registered passenger vessel. It shouldn't have been fired upon.
Yeah, well, when you find that out 100 years later, whatever, right? I mean, it is what it is. But... No, I'm just saying, okay, I get it. Transport. Yeah, transport vessels are a legitimate target during wartime. Ask anybody during the Civil War. They'll tell you the trains were attacked and the fucking transports were harassed everywhere you turned. But passenger vessels is what I thought you guys were alluding to. And I'm like, really? Why are we... I'm going to go on holiday. Where are you going? Oh, wartime England. It sounds
but it's not. You got to remember, wartime England. What's going on? They do talk about something that does happen about here that I kind of skipped over, which was where they attacked Whitehall, the submarine. Where was it? Submarines attack. Maybe I haven't gotten to it yet. Basically,
Lauca at Harrington, Whitehaven, Cumberland. Yeah, no, that was on the 16th. It was a couple of days ago.
Okay, so I kind of skipped over that. I shouldn't have done that because the Germans are shelling every now and then a few of the British coastlines. All right, in an attempt to force the British out of Scapa Flow, right, to get them to start to commit. All right, their fleet, because if the fleet is separated, then they can choose as they're concentrated when to attack, and that's what these ships are attempting to do. But overall, what's really going on in the British Isles? Nothing. I mean, you can go for a lark in the British Isles. There's not really any heavy fighting going on there, and in the southern part of France, to be honest, what's really going on there? The Germans aren't fighting. There's no shelling going on. This is before the advent of the airplane, where all of this becomes a battlefield. The battlefield is no longer just a strip of land. At this point in time, the battlefield is still just a strip of land along the edges.
Yeah, and there's also differences in the definition too, because there's all-out war, total war, and protracted war. Now, say a protracted war, for example, is something like Vietnam, where you could literally take a Qantas plane to fucking Saigon and go for a fucking holiday as a civilian. I could go to Syria right now and fucking walk around Damascus as a tourist right now. That's their protracted conflicts. There was total war in Europe, but America wasn't involved. So as far as they were concerned, it was more protracted over in England, and they weren't involved, so they shouldn't have been fired upon. This does change later on, though.
Well, yeah, but at the time, they're not really worried about it.
Wait a minute, though. I can't go to Syria.
Yeah, you can.
No, I can't.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I cannot go to PDX and fly to Syria.
Yes, you absolutely fucking can.
I think that he can't because he's an American, and there's certain things that he can't fly to. All right, that they're considered off limits by our State Department. And Syria's one of them.
Pretty sure. Like you'll have to
allowed back in the country after going to Damascus.
Now, you'll have to answer a lot of fucking very difficult questions. Yes, but however, you can absolutely go there.
And if you go there, well, yeah, but there's no direct flight from the United States to Damascus. Okay, there are rules that there are Americans. The State Department has declared it, area persona non grata. And if you go there, you are violating laws in the United States. You are. Okay, and will they do anything to you? Most likely not, because that's one of the rules that constantly gets violated by American, civilians that they don't actually apply to them directly. But can they? Yes. Will you get debriefed? As long as you're willing to get debriefed by State Department and intelligence officials, generally they don't charge you with a crime. But they can't. That's one of the things that we declared Serbia in that area off limits for a while when what's his name, Bobby Fischer, went there, where he sat up there and actually spat on the deck to have his game, where he sat up there and spat on the State Department warning that says that you could be charged. He was like, go ahead and charge me then. He also didn't come back to the United States, by the way, before he died.
Oh, well, funny little interlude. The State Department also says that Sierra Leone's still not a really good place to go to, but that's a load of bullshit. I can tell you that right now.
Well, but it makes it easier for you guys to go there. And we're unfortunately off limits, so it kind of sucks. All right, you can see that as the German forces, they're just continually to push. All right, you got Liftstock in Poland is now taken. Brestock is in Poland is taken. All right, the Russians are getting the shit kicked out of them everywhere. And of course, what are the British doing? Well, they're promising the Serbs that once the war is over and you're free, well, we'll let Bosnia-Herzegovina and all these other areas that are part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, well, they'll be carved up. They'll be allowed to have self-determination.
Right? And that's basically it went back to the former Yugoslavia.
The German government then demands that the United States government, for limitations are against the submarine use and activity, are going to be limited. They agree, yes, we're going to agree to your terms again, that we agreed to, and then we sank the Arabic because we violated it. And we come back and go, look, you weren't supposed to do this. And they come back and go, oh, you're right. We're not supposed to do this.
Okay, just quickly on the 21st, Battle of Scimitar Hill, which is another part of the Suva Bay campaign. That's now going. Italy decides that they're going to go and show their true colours and swap sides. So they declare war on Turkey. First authenticated case of a German submarine firing on a ship's crew in open boats. So this is the British SS Rule, which is another steamship. That's what SS means. So it's not an HMS, which is His Majesty's ships. So it's not Navy. It's supposed to be a civilian cargo, or I say cargo vessel because I only mentioned the crew. But yeah, this was the big no-no. This was back in the gentlemanly war type deal, where if you did sink a ship, you were supposed to give them clear notice to evacuate and then sink it. And then the crew was supposed to be treated nicely. And then this is the point where the Germans go, you know what, we don't have much food and room and stuff like that, and fuck these cunts. So that's basically a war crime, which the Americans will also go, see?
Well,
They're
the
cunts.
rule though was, if I'm not mistaken, was a Q ship, wasn't it?
No, submarines at first were supposed to do that too. They were supposed to give warning before they'd sunk.
Well, yeah, but this British ship, the SS Rule, was actually a Q ship. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of those ships where they were hiding. Yes, yeah. So we're just a regular, just a passenger, or a freighter, and then they dropped the sides and opened fire on them.
Hang on. I'll have to look this fella up.
If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about that, but I think that they were a Q ship. All right. So the Germans weren't just being dicks about things. They were being dicks, to be honest with you. But the reason they did this was, I think, because this was a Q ship that fired on them, and they said, screw you guys. If you want to sit there and be enemies, then be enemies.
Yeah, continue talking.
So, and as we go through, like I said, the Germans, you can see that the Germans against the Russians are succeeding. All right, you roll on over into September, okay? You see that the French forces are now trying to occupy. They're getting ready for their campaign against the in the Arabian Peninsula. It hasn't been there yet. Another Grodno, right, which is once again in the east, has now been taken, and then you have the Tsar. The Tsar supersedes Grand Duke Nicholas in supreme command of the armies. Okay, virtually, he's the commander in chief. All right, and has performed duties, and he'll perform these duties as commander in chief. All right, until the Tsar's abdication on March 15th, which is coming. All right, the following year. All right, so there's a lot of unrest. Well, a year away. This is over a year away still. So there's still the unrest is building. All right, you have an action in the northwest frontier of India, the Hafiz Corps. I don't know much about the Hafiz Corps. I probably should take a look a little bit closer about that. The Russian counteroffensive again in Galicia. This is the campaign against the Russians' attempt to counteroffensive against the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. Okay. Nicholas is sent down to command the Caucasus. Grand Duke Nicholas. All right.
Well, no, and you said Arch, so I thought Catholic Church. What is Rome doing at this point?
Rome is technically neutral.
Well, no, didn't the Pope last week when we were talking
Yes.
put out a call for peace?
Yes.
He's just being quiet for another 2 months.
Well, what else is he going to do? I mean, what's the great Vatican forces? Are they going to march on somebody?
Back in the day, they used to.
Well,
the good old days.
That was back in the good old days. They're not going to do anything at this point. I mean, they really don't have the ability to do anything.
Rightio, I got some more information on that.
Well, we can't call a crusade or something?
Well, you going to say he's going to announce a crusade?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, well, go on about the rule.
Right, on the 21st of August, which was a Saturday, off the Dover Straits, the William Dawson was torpedoed. Off the Atlantic off southwest England, 5 steamships believed to be attacked by the U-38, captained by Max Valentina. Yep, 1 tanker, others believed to be colliers, and the Rule is supposed to have been a collier. So there was the Rule, the Cobra, the Windsor, the Westbury, and the San Melito, all on the same day, by the same boat, by the same U-boat. And yeah, from best I can find, it's supposed to have been a collier, and the Rule was the only one where the the lifeboats were fired on.
Okay. So what was the reasoning that they used for firing on the boats?
None given.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big no-no.
I would probably suggest 1913, 1904, 1911, 1914. I'd suggest that it was one of the last ones to be sunk, and this looks like they got 5 all in one hit. And so the Cobber was hit at 7:04 in the evening. The Windsor was hit at 7:11 in the evening. The Westbury was hit at 7:04. San Melito was 7:14, and the Rule was at 7:13 in the evening. And I'd probably suggest that they'd probably picked up one too many people by the time they come to pick up the Rules crew.
Okay.
That may be it. But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Actually, I'll put this link in the side chat because that's got some juicy info.
Okay, well, we'll look at that later. All right. Let's continue on with this. The battle of Tarpol ends. Basically, it ends. The offensive against them ends. The United States, they got the Battle of Dvinsk, the Battle of Vilna. Okay, the Bushehr, which in the South Persia is attacked by tribesmen. They're basically just moving forward. The Bulgarian Frontier Convention is signed in Dimokruta. All right, the United States requests a recall of the Austro-Hungarian ambassador. All right, in other words, they recalled their ambassador because of the battles that's going on. The Bulgarians begin their partial mobilization. The Greeks begin their mobilization. what you start seeing here, all right? Then you see the battle, and I'm kind of pushing it because I want to talk about this. You see the Battle of Loos, which is on the Western Front. You see an offensive taking place for the Third Battle of the Artois, and the Second Battle of the Champagne. Basically, the big French and British campaigns and offensives. Now,
wait, when they led the offensive, did they have a giant white flag?
Well, the French at this point do not have a white flag. They're not the surrender monkeys that they become. Okay, at this point in the battle, all right. However, the reason I bring up the Battle of Loos is because the Battle of Loos is the first time the Allies used chemical weapons. They used phosgene. This is the great British offensive that begins. We're going to use, since you use chemical gas on us, we're going to use chemical gas on you. And they begin by loosing the gas, and the wind shifts and blows it right back into their faces.
Mm-hmm.
It turns into an absolute. This is not how you want an offensive to begin. By blowing the chemical weapon you want to use on the enemy back toward your own troops. So you can imagine how much of a disaster this was, okay? And they were expecting this to, open up the a huge area. Instead, it blows back on their troops. The troops are running willy-nilly. The offensive basically just doesn't even take place for all intents and purposes from that standpoint, with a large loss of life because it's so disjointed because of this attack. All right, so they haven't learned yet. Okay, you then go to full mobilization by the Bulgarians. There's talks between what's left of Serbia. All right, the Serbians are still fighting. In a little bit, the Serbian campaign is going to be over because the Serbian campaign ends in 1960. Okay. In Great Britain, more people are changing over. You have now. I don't understand this. Maybe you could help out, Fardy, on this. Lieutenant General A. Murray is appointed the Chief of Imperial General Staff in Great Britain. What does that mean?
Basically, he's just become like the field marshal, the 5-star general of the combined forces in combat.
Okay, so basically, this is now he is the way we would look at it as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right, on the ground. Okay.
So mainly all campaigns now go through him.
So at this point, though, Churchill is still the admiral, right?
Admiralty. Yeah.
No,
Admiral.
Churchill's been removed.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, by this stage, yeah. This was over the failure of the Gallipoli campaign, the Dardanelles campaign.
Yep.
Well, the Dardanelles, I thought, was still continuing.
It is.
It is.
It is.
It
Right?
is. But it's
Since they've already
going.
committed to it, that they're going to continue to fight it out.
Well,
They've already removed Churchill.
It's already a disaster. And
well, no, if they dug their heels in, though, why remove the man who orchestrated it? Why not let him, well, for lack of a better, ride or die on it?
It's about at this point there where they've sort of realised that nothing's going to eventuate from this, and they're now sort of trying to look at pulling everybody out, but they're trying to do it without looking like a bunch of cowards.
Well, they're worried about the looking at it as if it's a loss of life. They're trying to salvage the best of it. They blame Churchill for it not succeeding, but the reality is that they had badly underestimated the Turks, and they don't want to admit to it yet. And so they continue the attack.
Yeah, the only benefit of it was that basically the Aussies were the last to pull out, and when we finally did, the way that we did it was so fucking brilliant that we didn't even lose a single person, and by the time the Turks realised that we had pulled out, we'd already gone.
You know,
when we
real quick, Falcon says in the chat, and it's not a super chat or nothing, but it's good enough. Oh, land war stuff. It's so below the honorable air war.
Okay. The Greek premier, all right, obtains a secret consent from the King Constantine to proposed Entente expedition in Sri Lanka. The Malayan battleship Benito Brin is destroyed by an internal explosion. We don't know exactly what happened there. It could have been because somebody wanted to scuttle their own ship. And then on the 20th of September, you have the beginning of the Battle of the Kut. Now, Townsend is the leader of the Mesopotamian campaign, right? And I've been talking about this, all right. And he's been following what they've been doing is coming up to Tigris, all right, all the way up here. At Kut, he is surrounded, all right, with his troops, and he has thought of himself as I'm going to come up here and I'm going to take Baghdad and I'll be the conqueror of Baghdad. And my star will rise and I will be this. Well, he is surrounded at Kut. He immediately sits up there and asks for help, saying the situation is desperate. The British forces, because it's a desperate action, use desperate measures to try and get to him. In reality, though, even though he's surrounded, he has 4 months of supplies. So the British at this point launched these desperate, actions in an attempt to get him out of encirclement. But in reality, they could have planned and said, okay, you got 4 months. We'll set up and build up our forces for a combined attack to try and free it. But because of Townsend's comments, they basically go into this battle in piecemeal and are defeated by the Turks. And after four months or so of being surrounded in Kut, he surrenders the British contingent here, right? Which includes some people who are absolutely starved to death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Townsend himself, and I'm realizing that I'm just skipping over that portion of it because it's a siege. He is laid under siege before eventually he has to give in, and when he does, he's treated very well by the Turks. He really is. He's wined, he's dined, he's paraded around. All right. He goes into and is basically given what do they call it? Where you give your promise not to do certain things, that you're a prisoner and that you have to remain prisoner. But
he's just under oath.
Yeah, he basically walks around as if he's a freaking celebrity. Meanwhile, his men, the men that he led into that battle, are basically beaten and starved to death. He gave up like 12,000 men or something like that, and I think only half of them survive to the end of the war.
And this is kind of a little funny trait that the British do have, that we give the French a lot for fucking surrendering and all this kind of stuff, but you sometimes have a look at when the British do surrender, the amounts of forces that they do end up giving up. And this also translates into World War II as well in the in Southeast Asia, where like the Philippines and Singapore, and there was like tens of thousands of troops, and you sit there looking at it like, hang on a minute, couldn't you possibly, like, I don't know, fucking shoot at them? And even still, like with the fall of Singapore and all this, the Aussies wanted to fight on because there was enough of us and we had the ammo. But the Pommers just went, no, we don't want to get everybody killed. That's partly the point of fucking war. No, we're going to surrender. And yeah, like the British are fucking renowned for just giving up thousands upon thousands of troops.
Yeah, when the higher command tends to do that, you can't say that Americans don't do that either. But generally, when they, like for the Battle of Corregidor, all right, thousands of American troops were surrendered. But then again, those thousands of American troops were starving to death.
Mm.
All right, they literally were starving to death. They literally basically had nothing to fight back with. Okay, so during the Battle of Corregidor, when it finally fell. Okay, so there comes a point where it's like, okay, yeah, you have to surrender because your people are dying of starvation. At that point, you have to give it up.
Yeah,
because
yeah, Vicksburg comes to mind.
But when you're sort of sitting there for 4 months with 4 months' supplies, twiddling your bloody thumbs, waiting for someone to come and rescue you, that's a bit of a, hang on a minute, dickhead, what were you doing this whole time?
They only sat there for 4 months?
Yeah, they waited till all their supplies ran out.
Yeah.
But what was bad about that was he said, I don't have the supplies. He basically said that he couldn't hold out because they had asked him initially, can you hold out while we arrange to do a consolidated breakthrough? And he was saying, no, it's desperate. You have to save me now. And they basically threw forces toward this battle when it was absolutely unnecessary. Right? And they put him in a piecemeal as a result, and they lost.
How entrenched were they? Okay, no. And I may be coming across as a dick here, but I had said Vicksburg comes to mind, and then no, maybe it doesn't. Vicksburg held out for how long? 2 years? 2 and a half?
Well, they weren't. No, they surrendered after a month of siege.
No, they were sieged for more than a month, man.
No, they were sieged for a month. The campaign was 2 years long, but once they were surrounded, they lasted a month.
All right, we're not going to devolve back to the Civil War. If we want to start yelling, we can do that later.
No, you see, that's the fundamental parts of war. If you don't learn the lessons that everyone learnt in the last one, you're doomed to fucking fail them again in the next one. So, like, every fucking war since and previous to World War I does have relevance.
So, the Greek government still doesn't want to play nice with the Allies. Basically, they refused the French and British offer. Now, they're still upset because that island was seized. Remember Limnos? All right, which a few months before, earlier in the year, had been seized by them. All right, the British and Russian governments agreed to a request of the Persians, all right, for a subvention. Now, I don't know what a subvention is, okay, but obviously they're talking to the Persians. And then finally you have Lord Derby assumes control of recruiting in Great Britain, which, okay, that's great, but I guess what they're doing is they're saying they're having problems recruiting forces from Great Britain to go across and fight on the land, which considering the damage that's been done, like with the Battle of Artois, Loos and so forth, and then Artois, I can understand why people would start to become reluctant about it when you read about some of the stupidity that goes on. I mean, you use a chemical weapon and it blows back and hits yourself. You look inept because you were.
And this is also part and parcel too to modern mainstream media and all this, and entrenched reporters on site looking at the battles, giving unfettered, unvetted bloody reports back to the civilians, where before it was all the great adventure and all this kind of stuff. Now it's like the great adventure is only going to get yourself chopped up to a million pieces on a fucking muddy plain.
Either that or staring blankly at the wall. Yeah, this war was no good for anybody. And we're about at the end of September here. Go ahead and round it out, guys. We're just a bit over an hour, so we're making good time.
That was Lord Derby. Basically, the last thing is September 30th, and Lord Derby takes control of Syria. So.
Well, then back to the usual questions. Russia, they're getting their ass handed to them. Tsar has his hands full. Rasputin is stinking up the court. How's it all panning out? And the fiefdom, the peasants, they're deserting the army, and then they're running amok, aren't they?
Well, the desertions are really going to really start to happen in November. All right. Yes, they're fighting, they're losing. But when the winter comes and the lack of supplies is really going to take the toll, that's really going to cause the Russians to basically their government is going to dissolve here pretty quick, and they're going to have a new government take place. All right, that's coming very soon. All right, where the Tsar is no longer the Tsar; he is now just a constitutional monarch. And then eventually it's going to lead to they decide to continue the fight. They're going to do it for about another year before the Russian Revolution. But that's coming.
It's the rise of Lenin, the rise of the communists, fall of the Bolsheviks, and like I said before, everyone wants the fucking Cossacks on their side, but the Cossacks are sort of holding out.
Yeah. So Russia's the big loser. In this 2 month span, the Russians are just getting. Yeah, they're able to do their counteroffensive, but their counteroffensive is of limited success, and they're basically thrown back.
Extremely localized. There's also fuck all cohesion between all the different elements of the Russian army as well, because you do have communist groups, you've got Bolshevik groups, you've got groups that were recruited from the Cossacks who the people from all the way up the other end of fucking Russia on the Aleutian side of it who didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They were just given a gun and said, right, fucking you see someone, shoot him. And
rush forward, and then they're starting to send people behind them going, when that guy falls, pick up his gun. But I don't have a gun. Yep. And that's basically what they're being told. Mass ways.
Yep, there's very little in the way of artillery. There's bugger all in the way of machine guns on the Russian side. Like literally in the entirety of Russia, you could almost count the amount of machine guns in one hand.
Yeah.
And there's zero air power. Absolutely none.
Well, no, and here's the thing also is Russia itself was built upon the old world ideal. It was still medieval. MC was right. It was backwards. It was a fiefdom. That doesn't work well with the industrial, I guess, the industrial complex.
Not when the industrial complex is willing to go to utilize its full potential. All right, and not care about fifis.
And then when you also have the entire front line of the Russian front too, that's a hell of a lot of people and a hell of a lot of places to try and send supplies. And you got internal fiefdom and just the antiquated fucking supply lines and production facilities and all this kind of stuff. You're trying to keep these guys fed and shit, and it's a losing battle.
Well, that's the other problem is the other problem with the Tsarist Russia is how corrupt the aristocracy is. All right, and this is, people don't understand this, but what's happening is yeah, the Russian soldiers, Tsar Nicholas is trying to supply them, but the nobles below him are always taking their cut. When there's troops moving around, when there's supplies being moved, there's always an asshole taking his cut.
Mm-hmm. And you'll usually find he's some fucking pathetic little weasel who's got all of his blokes in a nice safe spot, but he needs all the fucking supplies, while the blokes who are actually in the front lines are like, we really need the ammo. Oh no, that's 200 k's north of here.
Yes. And so all of this is not, I mean, none of it is conducive to the Tsar has personally himself, wherever he goes, he has a lot of power. But when you think about the size of Russia, he's only going to be in one place at one time. And in order to reform all of that, if Russia was even going to stand a chance, really, in this battle, if the Russians were even going to stand a chance, the Tsar would have needed to break the power of the aristocracy around him first. Mm-hmm. Now, he had that in mind. Believe it or not, before World War II, or World War I rather, begins, the Tsar was getting ready to basically create a civil war that he would have won, and he would have won it against his aristocracy.
And funnily enough, this is where Rasputin does come into this too, because a lot of the aristocracy did see that what the Tsar was doing was, oh, he's been corrupted by this fucking Rasputin fella. Oh, geez, this Rasputin fella's not a really nice person. He's trying to destroy our country from the top, because Rasputin had the year of the Tsar.
Well, Tsarina, not so much the Tsar, but the Tsarina, his wife.
Oh yeah, his wife, yeah. And by proxy, what her indoors says, fucking must go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that that's going on. But anyway, I'm sorry. We kind of got sidetracked a little bit. I apologize.
Okay, well, no, America. You didn't get sidetracked at all, actually. That's exactly what I wanted you to dive into. And you're right. When you have the ear of the wife, you also have the ear of the husband. Let's be honest.
Yep.
To an extent, that's true.
Yeah, and this will go a long way to help the overthrow of the Tsar and all this. Now, on to America, which is now where it's starting to get interesting. As we mentioned, there's been a few ships sunk, and the Yanks have sort of pointed the finger at the Germans saying, hey, that's not cricket. And this is partly where the US government's starting to see, hang on a minute, if we do have to get involved, this is where we can start getting the American people on our side to get invested into this.
Right. Now, that's Woodrow Wilson. But Woodrow Wilson has to play a duplicitous game. All right. And because while he wants us in the war, and I do believe this, I believe Woodrow Wilson did want us in the war on the side of the British.
He said it from the beginning, and look at him and his cousin. They're British. Come on.
Yeah, but at the same time, the American people overall do not want to be involved in this war.
Yeah. See, that's a thing where everybody keeps saying, like, oh, Australia doesn't have to worry because if we ever got attacked, America will be in with us. No, the actual realistic situation is we've got to convince the Americans to be in with us. Now, whether we get attacked or not is another story. It'd be a case of, oh, Australia got attacked in the American press. There wouldn't be really a question of what are the Americans going to do until it really affects you guys. And the way we've always imagined it is if Pine Gap ever got attacked, then technically that's American soil. Then technically you guys would have no choice but to join up.
Yeah, the reality is though, to be honest, if Australia got attacked, America would defend it. That is a reality now. All right, back then it wasn't, but today, if the way the circumstances are today, Americans have an affinity for the British, all right, in the British colonies. So, if you want to look at it now, if India gets attacked, America won't give a shit, all right. But if Australia gets attacked, America will immediately go into war with it. They would. But I truly believe that. Just like the British, if the Germans get attacked, don't expect the Americans to join up. If the French get attacked, do not just assume that the Americans are going to join up, because we won't.
Well, there is the actual realization and the reality that, like, if we did ever get attacked, like nowadays, initially it'd be like, well, what's Australia done for us lately? And after it's explained to them, they might go, oh, well, okay, then fair enough, we'll join. but it's not going to be an instant action.
But it's closer to instant reaction. You're right. It's closer to instant reaction than if Brazil gets attacked, for example.
Yeah.
Or if even if Japan gets attacked, believe it or not, you have a greater affinity than even if Japan gets attacked, in my opinion.
Yeah. But yeah, well, in this instance here, right, with World War One, World
War One was a different story. America wasn't that way at that point yet.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Right from the beginning, though, it was always going to be you have to convince the population for the government to get the carte blanche.
Yes, that's very true.
And at this point in time, the population was, well, that's a European thing. What's it got to do with us?
Yeah.
And this is the point where it changes.
So this is basically September or August, September. And there's some real big incidents that happened starting in October. And Falcon, I think if we can get Falcon on for next week, this is something that really is important because the Germans do take control of the air power for a significant period of time beginning in October.
Yep, and this is the point where the Germans invent the interrupter gear. Mm-hmm. And that's the massive turning point in air combat, because that now means that you just basically point the aeroplane and shoot. And the Allies didn't really cotton on to how are they doing this, and we tried all sorts of stupid things, like even armor plating portions of the propeller, so if the machine gun fires when the propeller's in the road, the bullet will bounce off the propeller. Stupid shit like that.
I mean, it was somewhat effective. It was dangerous, but it was somewhat effective.
Well, yeah, until you had what do they call it again? Is it the stutter gear or
interrupter?
Interrupter gear, yeah. But no, I think that about does it for this week, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with the news wrap up, and hey, I might be getting a job here soon. If so, the schedule will change. Got to pay the bills. Other than that, I'm going to try, once again, we're working on getting the RPG stuff up on the channel here soon. We're trying to speed through the prologue of the story. That way we can come up with a much better story and not everybody trying to kill each other. Because that is kind of what happens at this point. But other than that, I'm going to try and upload more and do more live streams. We'll be back next Sunday for sure, and tomorrow for the news. Good night, good luck, and don't go to France. Candid made it out alive. She was lucky. I'm telling you.
I think it's a bit of an overstatement, but it is.
Good night, everybody. And thank you, Falcon. Yeah. It's just a temp job up here, but it's real close to my house, and it'll be like $11-12 an hour, working 9 to 5. Closer to Christmas, it'll be like 7 days a week. So, yeah, things might shut down for a little while at that point, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Good night, everyone.
Boobies.